Hey team, so I had a really good conversation today about food security with some of the farmers at the Grafton show. When we saw empty shelves during COVID, we didn't have a food supply issue. There was a 3% increase in demand, very small amount of demand increase, and our supply lines, these just-in-time supply lines, can't compensate for that. They can't actually deal with it. And now what we're looking at is an actual food supply shortage. So there's a few elements of this. One is climate related, that a lot of the fertilizer companies use natural gas to make the fertilizer. They use a process called the Haber-Bosch process, and it takes nitrogen out of the atmosphere, turns it into ammonia, and then they turn it into fertilizer. Now, even though that does create CO2, the other thing it does is provides food for half the people on the planet. So if we stopped synthetic fertilizers right now, what you'd see is billions of people in third world countries would starve to death, and then it'd slowly move towards us. So certainly not a scenario that I want to see. Secondly, we've seen the people who supply our food from overseas tier up. And by that, I mean smaller amount of people own more stuff. And that's largely one of the reasons that I want investigations into COVID. During COVID, we had the biggest wealth transfer of human history. So not only was it the biggest, the amount of wealth that went from the welfare class, the working class, and the middle class to the super elite was bigger than all of the rest of history combined. So a massive amount of money went to them. And what did they do? They bought up our food systems. So right now, when we've got all these boats stuck in Shanghai, when they're already saying that the food shortages have started, we're going to start thinking, well, what can we do right now and what can we do politically? So the thing that we can do right now, first and foremost, is buy local. The more food we buy local, the more local producers grow, the more food we have being grown in our area. It's probably the best case scenario for hundreds of reasons. So Australia doesn't really have a right to farm. We have legislation and we have provisions of other documents that are called right to farm. What they are is the right to farm a product if it's legal to farm that product and it's sanctioned by the planning law. So there's a lot of things to that. Basically, if someone came in tomorrow and said, all right, you're not allowed to grow food in your backyard, or you're not allowed to grow meat, or even you're not allowed to eat meat that's grown here, suddenly that would be legal because they just passed that law, and then you're not allowed to grow food. So what I want to do is push for a right to farm. And so if you look around the world, there are a lot of places in the world that were bringing in laws where you aren't allowed to grow your own food. This is for someone like me that values libertarianism and personal freedoms is absolutely crazy, especially going into a food shortage era. But also there's definitely attack on meat. And it's very difficult if you wanted to control the food supply to do it if people are farming meat, because meat can replicate itself and it can take nutrients from the ground into the grass, into the animal, and you can walk around with it. Now, as far as I'm concerned, you should have a right to grow food in your backyard and you should have a right to choose what you eat. So let me know what you think about this, especially the right to farm and the attack on meat. But also, I'm getting a lot of airtime. So if my community wants me to say something, I will. Send it to me and let's get this out there. All right, much love, team.